से कहा था, हसनैन से कहा था कि जो गाइडलाइंस थे वो तमाम लोगों को ईमेल करे, उसने किए हैं कि नहीं किए हैं। हमने तो हार्ड कॉपीज भिजवाई थी, लेकिन ये कि ईमेल किए हैं कि नहीं किए। अगर नहीं किए हैं तो वो जरा निकालो, ठीक है। और उससे कहो कि आपने जो भी आप ईमेल करे ना, तो मुझे लाजमी ये चीज रखे, मुझे पता ही नहीं चलता वो हुआ है कि नहीं हुआ। और एक जो आप डीजी का जो है ना ईमेल, उसका पासवर्ड चेंज करके सिर्फ मुझे दे दो ये वाला, ठीक है ना। उससे कहो कि वो जो मैथ्स कैजुअलिटी एमसीआईएम की गाइडलाइंस थी, जो कॉपी थी, वो आपने भिजवाई है कि नहीं भिजवाई है। नहीं भिजवाई है तो वो मुझे भिजवा दो, उसको हम देख लेते हैं। हो गया ये।
Let me welcome everybody. Can you hear me well?
Yes,
Thank
we can
you.
hear you.
Thank you. So let me welcome all the participants for finding time to join, but especially let me welcome also Emmanuel Raju. Welcome. JC, please, thank you, and please put on your video, at least for a short while. We have the panel members, Sushmita Goswami and Nirmalji, and Siddiqui Saab. Aisha ji, please put on your video. तो मैंने अफवाना तो क्यों शुरू कर ही दूंगा. Hello. Yeah, so we are starting with this virtual roundtable on post-colonial futures for disaster risk reduction in South Asia. And we will start first with Emmanuel Raju from University of Copenhagen, giving us opening. After that, I would introduce the subsequent sequences that we have. So, Dr. Raju, may I request you to start, please?
Hello, everyone. Good morning, and
बंदा
thank
बोल
you.
रहा है.
Thank you so much, Mihir. We'd request everyone to kindly mute so that we don't have any interruptions. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. I know it's night for some people, like JC, who's joining us from New Zealand. Very nice to see a lot of familiar faces, and thank you for joining us this morning. I think globally, many of us are asking ourselves, how do we re-envision disaster studies? How do we reimagine disaster studies, both conceptually, theoretically, but also more importantly in practice? And many people on this call as well, Mihirji, who's been working with this question for over 20, 30 years. I see Ian is on the call. I see JC, many others who've actually been also engaging with this question for a very long time and have been working with a similar question in different ways in different parts of the world. So, and some of us, under the leadership of Mihir, have been trying to put together a special issue on post-colonial futures for disaster risk reduction in South Asia. And what does this mean for South Asia, which led us to inviting a number of scholars to reflect on the question. And some of them will be presenting on this topic today. And from my own research, almost for about, it's going to be 20 years now of the Indian Ocean tsunami that happened in 2004. And while disaster research, education, and practice has proliferated in India, I mean, it's no longer a little niche area, right? It's a very, very large sector in that sense. And we continue to see questions of hazards, vulnerability. How do these change? How do we move towards, how do we see a more, very often we see that local understandings of disasters are overshadowed by a global definition of disasters and paradigms as well. So how do we rethink, how do we re-challenge, how do we reposition many of these questions? How do we think of disasters continuously? We continue to see disasters as seen as singular events. How do we move towards a continued engagement with resisting processes of vulnerabilization? I think many of these questions continue to be important. And without further ado, I'll give the floor to Mihir to set the scene a little bit, and we invite our four speakers from the special issue. And I think very shortly, Manish will also share a link to the special issue that we've put together. I also want to take the opportunity to say many thanks to all the authors who've also contributed with many reflections to the special issue. Thank you. Mihir, over to you.
Thank you so much. You know, there are no full stops in this part of the world. there are only semicolons. And this is continuation of continuation of continuation. And thank you, Emmanuel Raju, to setting the scene on what is post-colonial and what is future, but also what is disaster risk and its reduction in this light, and what is South Asia, a prime colony now divided in many parts that fueled colonial powers for centuries. Never before I have found disaster and the study and actions around disasters have been so much at loss of direction between hazards and changed climate, between natural and human-made crisis, between risk and development and resilient recovery, between strong top-down leadership that we all aspire for, but also the spring of movements that we see and celebrate. Disaster study and actions are at the stage when all disasters, risk and their reduction are uncertain, cascading, tied up together, and interacting. So no disaster stands in isolation anymore. How we turn this loss of direction into an opportunity to reflect on the past, to think about the future, to contemplate colonial history, and how to move ahead to post-colonial world, not only in time and geography, but also in terms of values, ways of living with our own selves, with each other, and with Mother Earth, of which we are a part. With this overwhelming agenda, hugely overwhelming, in mind, we have a short roundtable is planned. We have energetic, young, diverse, and scholarly panel members who will present to provoke us with their viewpoints, many points, towards this rushing away from the past and to the future of disaster risk reduction. Yes, futures, plural, and in many futures, as there is no one top-down singular future in post-colonial DRR, from my to us, and from our future to million futures. The presentation by Dr. Goswami on a piece of land in Chennai, India, will show us how colonial idea of dominance of industrial city has reduced the rest of the non-city and lands and landscapes of living, making, moving, and saving nature. Those who are left out in DRR response, not only women, but gender, not one or two gender, many genders, more than one gender, and non-gender, and will be presented by Aditi Sharan, who has joined us. And she will be taking a case of Hijras as a case to start with in South India. How do we move from post-colonial binaries to invent what, if I may call, multinaries or polynaries, from othering to us, to all, to each of us? Nirmal Riaz is with us, and he will tell us about how reimagine an inclusive response in the light of floods in Pakistan that is not perpetually unequal, that is where DRR is a way to disrupt the continuity of coloniality in all its forms and substance. Building on floods in Pakistan, Dr. Siddiqui will explain the colonial logic of power and oppression and how post-colonial futures need to be bottom-up, self-organizing, seamless, and multi-centered departures, if not beginning and end. That is how do we move ahead from state structures to alliances of the citizens, from a mitigation plan to millions of people planning mitigation. Dr. JC, who has told us how, in the past, DRR is an illusion created by us, for us, to illusion us, each other. He will help us sum up the ideas presented here and kindly show our way ahead for action and learning. I request Manish from AIDMI to upload the latest issue of SouthAsiaDisasters.net titled Post-Colonial Futures for Disaster Risk Reduction in South Asia in the chat box. Manish, please, for all of us to have a look. If not now, please download it to read and reference later. JC Gillard, and Raju made this 211th issue happen, and I just followed their light with my team, Vishal Bhai and Manish Bhai. This issue has contributors from India and Pakistan, Afghanistan and Nepal and Sri Lanka, but also from Sweden and Australia, UK, US and Denmark. SouthAsiaDisasters.net is one of the only, perhaps the only, locally owned flow of information and knowledge, which is not only vertical, top down, but also is lateral from one South Asian countries to another. Today on its 211th issue. It has over 1,200 contributors so far in the 2 decades in the past, and 12,000 readers, mostly in Asia and some in Africa. That is very welcoming. Focus is on the victims as affected citizens of the issues and the failing or the failed states or the system of humanitarianism. You are welcome to contribute, suggest themes, and also be on the mailing list if you wish. And I would request Manish to put up those details as well on the chat box subsequently. The agenda of these issues have come from the demand from its readers and contributors, and from time to time from our critics as well. And thus it is yours to own when you make it. Is that a post-colonial idea about ownership? All this is in English, and the irony is not lost on us. We are reintroducing at least one piece in each of our next publications in the local languages. From now on, you will see the first one in Gujarati in this specific issue. Post-colonial actions start with us and not with the colonizers. Further, we have a visual from Prinita Thevaraj from Sri Lanka on the cover of this issue, showing conflicts and contradictions in post-colonial life that colonizes us within and from without in ways not known when the colonization was actually set loose. Efforts here is to see DRR as a discursive, rhetorical, and political term, how DRR interacts and intersects, and inter-impacts DRR from global to local to translocal citizens and institutions. That's the place we are coming from. And we hope that in next hour, our panel members and all of us will make the most of it. I would like to request Dr. Sushmita Goswami, who is a PhD fellow at the Global Health section in the Department of Public Health, to start with her presentation. She has, her interest encompasses disaster risk reduction, climate, and peripheral urbanization. And she has an excellent case study where one interview as a source has made tremendous difference in how from one you could see so many different perspectives emerging. Sushmita Goswami, please.
Thank you, Mihir, for setting the tone of this wonderful discussion. And a very good afternoon, good morning to everyone who is attending this live stream. I'm Suchishmita, as Mihir introduced. I'm a PhD scholar in Copenhagen, and I would be telling through my poetry, I would be talking to you about my field work, about the nuances that come out in the disaster recovery, in the land planning, in urbanization, and how much it is for you to judge how much things have changed or have not changed at all. So the poetry is about an elderly woman who is in her late 60s. And when I met her in early 2023 during one of my fieldwork visit, she had already changed her lives for about 4 to 5 times in her lifetime, for personal reasons such as marriage, but mostly due to government neglect, inhabitability, and annual disasters. Every time her house grew much smaller. So the poetry goes, so I have a small poetry after the field work, when I came back home, this emotional piece came out of me, just as a tribute to her. And it goes like, the price of Pati's land. Pati means in Tamil, those who are attending here from Chennai or Tamil Nadu would be knowing that, it refers to grandmother in the language of Tamil. Imagine a land found by chance, bought in pence, and ruled by the whims of the Brits. The land with many names, Madras Pattinam, Madras, Chennai. The find becomes a major port and trading center. The fisher folks and the villagers' lives got shuffled and moved by scales. A white town and a black town emerged within a distance of as little as 2 kilometers. The French tease the place briefly. How did that whimsical chance meeting become true love? It's not too hard to tell. A briny smelling air and the softest rice cake can steal any heart, right? Many villages transcended boundaries to become part of the city, mostly unplanned to cater the needs of the Raj. Susan Neal's work unearthed this fine history that we are talking about today. Few copies are still breathing in the archives of the old libraries of the city. Independence came in 1947. Equality, democracy, and fraternity were promised. Black Town and White Town name ceased to exist, for all spaces merged to become one with the city of Madras. Colonizers left, but wars went on. The war for dignity, language, and ecology. The resilient people of Chennai fought valiantly. Some were lost, many were won. Over the time, the city grew. Assemblage of villages, forests, and wetlands were swallowed by the city. Lifelines of ecosystem destroyed and unassembled, forgotten. Chennai chose eminence over transcendence. New boundaries were created by cyborgs of the new city. Forests turned into elite institutions and marshland turned into huge department stores. Unmindful gentrification pushed the most vulnerable into state-sponsored ghettos. During an untimely October downpour, 40 kilometers away from the center, in one such ghetto for the flood-displaced resettlers, wakes up Pati in sweat and chills in the middle of the night, shouts out loud facing her son, "Oh, you monster, with how many pence did you sell my land for?" Thank you. I will take a few minutes to just reflect on the poem with all of you together and just note at this maps together. So every time her house grew smaller and her life became more vulnerable, and these disasters for which she had to change her house ranged from yearly flood to fire to tsunami. So this poetry is a tool of showing lives of many other women whom I interviewed during my fieldwork, who shared very similar story. Few of the women whom I interviewed were also resettled because of the successive agricultural failure. This resonates with Yechel's concept of displaceability, right? Which refers to repeated involuntary displacement of the same group of people from the resources and rights associated with the city. I also intend to show through this poetry how the idea of city making from colonial to modern times had not undergone much change. It is always the urban poor who were most susceptible to being removed. Historically, the British assembled 7 fishing villages by the port of southern India and developed Madras city out of it. They were gradually demarcated into Black Town and White Town. Of course, there is no scope of imagination or doubt who occupied which spaces in the city. This also tells us how this imagination and this pattern of city planning has not changed over the years. The current government in almost all of Global South have exactly the same model of peripheralization of the urban poor. If we look into the map of Chennai city, we see how Chennai city expanded over years and became Greater Chennai. The growth of the city is founded to be dependent on the expansion of the very urban built-in area over the years. The timeline and the geographical boundaries of these women with whom I interviewed can almost be mapped with the timeline of the map of Greater Chennai. As you can see, how, over the years, the Chennai have expanded. So there were a number of like small industries or textile, industry, indigenous way of making things, which was then completely shut down because the urbanization expanded with time. As if silently they were making and growing the city, and once it is prosperous, they were being further shifted away from that space. Exactly in the same design the colonizers used. With every move, there is always an immense sense of loss in terms of memories, histories, identities, and established livelihood. Thank you. So,
Thank you.
Thank
you so
these
much.
are some of the further readings and which inspired me to write this poem. And this poetry is, as discussed, was inspired by interviewing an elderly woman who lives in one of the peripheral resettlement site in urban Chennai. This discussion was part of my fieldwork, which is funded by an interdisciplinary and international research project called Disaster Research Creation in Urban Resettlement Processes, funded by the International Research of Fund Denmark, which was won by Emmanuel Raju in 2021. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Smita, so much. And underlining the importance of poetry in DRR text, where only numbers and maps and reports matter, how it gives a light to a whole range of issues you can't generally capture. Let us go now next to Nirmal Riaz, please. And are you ready if you want to upload? And she works as a senior research associate at Karachi Urban Lab, cool, IBA. And she's a social anthropologist and has worked as a student for Max Planck Institute and International Peace and Rule of Law in Heidelberg. She's going to tell us about floods in Pakistan and how that can help us understand post-colonial DRR and the future differently. Nirmal Riaz, please.
Can anyone hear me? Everybody hears me, right?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Okay. Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure and a privilege to be here today speaking with you all. I am so I was formerly based at Karachi Urban Lab, and now I have moved to North America recently. I haven't directly engaged with the idea of disaster in my research career. However, I have indirectly been engaging with it as a social anthropologist, and I have been working with the idea of risk for the past 1.5 years, especially 24-hour risk, or what is called cyclical risk, in urban communities, especially in informal settlements in Karachi. And so I have been looking at disasters, and I also in the wake of 2022 floods, I was able to coordinate volunteer help during the floods. So I was able to see firsthand the poor management that came after the disaster of 2022 floods. So I'm going to be sharing my slides here and speaking, kind of putting things into context about how I look at disasters and how disaster mitigation can be improved over time, or how the testimonies of people who have suffered at the hands of poor management, poor disaster management, not only disaster management, I would say. I mean, it's the idea that the disaster risk can be reduced, it can also be created over time, or historically it has also affected certain communities and not others. So I would share my slide here. And please let me know whenever I'm surpassing my given time. So for me, it was interesting to know that, can you see my screen, my shared screen? Yeah. So I think for me, it was interesting to know that etymology of disasters is something that evades us, like the position of stars and planets. It's something that is not it comes from the old Italian word of disastro, which is the word that conveys the idea of the positions of stars and planets, which could be destructive, which has a destructive effect on human beings. And I was reading this paper which referred to Stalin's work of disasters as revelatory crisis, and that's how I thought about not disasters not as something that are natural but are created and are man-made, and they rather reveal things that already exist, reveal crises that already exist, reveal problems that already are part of the landscapes or the topographies and the geographies in which we inhabit. So disasters are not new to Pakistan. Flash floods, whether they are due to heavy monsoons or unseasonal torrential rains, riverine floods, droughts, earthquakes, heat waves, and cyclone storms can be listed as major disasters. However, the two events that led to the pivotal development of disaster management authorities in Pakistan were the 2005 earthquake and the 2010 floods. And then, of course, we've had subsequent floods and disasters after that. But it's interesting how Pakistan is very reactive when it comes to disaster management, and it reacts rather than having a robust kind of system for having like an instinctive understanding of how we can deal with disasters. So it was not until the 2022 floods that the disaster discourse gained international attention. And it was the Sharm el-Sheikh conference, the COP27, where Pakistan kind of advocated itself. Now, this was coming from a post-colonial instinct where Pakistan was kind of fighting back with the idea that, we have always suffered at the hands of the West and the disproportionate effects of climate change and the colonial conditions that have existed even way before these disasters existed. And this came in the form of the loss and damage funds, which I don't think have been operationalized yet. This was I found out that in March there were floods in the northern regions in Savat especially, and this has not been operationalized yet. So I have a lot to say about loss and damage, but I think I wouldn't really go so deeply into it. So the response to disasters or risk reduction in Pakistan has always been ad hoc and very reactive, and it's not something that is robust, I would say, or like it doesn't really take into consideration people into the consultative processes that comes that can respond to displacement and disasters and diseases that comes after disasters. Now, because I've been working with risk for the past 1.5 years in urban and formal settlements, I have understood that disasters are not, they have compounding effects, and poor planning and infrastructure compounds the effect of disasters, mean that then there's this urgent need to develop the resilience of critical infrastructure to enable it to withstand climate shocks and such as floods. This hasn't happened, and I have personally seen this in. I also come from the coastal region of Vadim. My parents are from there. I hail from there, which has time and time again has been affected by riverine floods and unexpected torrential rains as well. So, and I had the chance last year to visit myself at a conference that was held by local people. This was being held by the lawyers, by the local activists who've been kind of trying to fight back against the infrastructural projects which have been built. They were initially built for agrarian benefits. However, they have now turned into calamities themselves. Infrastructures have become calamities themselves. They have become disasters themselves. So there was a conference that was held in February 2023, where the failures of the left bank outfall drain in Badin were outlined, where one of the activists, one of the people who were basically, they were an affectee of this infrastructure, because what this drain does is that in every flood, it kind of fails to drain the water from these villages and drowns out whole villages, their crops and everything. So they are and there's this kind of existing or continuance of this post-colonial thinking and idea that people don't know anything, that people are unaware or people are ignorant. And this is where this resident and affectee of the town Kadhar, Abdul Ghafoor Chandio, was talking about and complaining about the officers. So this is where he says how the officers tell us there are no leakages in the left bank outfall drain. That is a lie. Move this window so I can see my own presentation. I'm so sorry. That is a lie, as the banks of the drain are all coming apart. We complain of the incompetent officers and suggest that better engineers should be made part of the reconstruction of this project. When Fakir Natho and Bahadur Khan Lund, these people are, villages, their villagers, the fellow villagers, were against the construction of the drain, then these same officers had a condescending attitude towards us. And they said, we are uneducated people who are against development projects and progress. In the end, we only experienced hunger and decimation of people living here. So this is from a conference where these people were quite passionately speaking about the things that infrastructures can do and infrastructures can unfold in the form of condescending attitudes have still continued, and there is class disparity and kind of outfall of colonial maps that were drawn and topographies which are unequal, which affect these people. I think I will head to my conclusion now, where working with flood affected communities, not only in the rural and coastal part of Sindh, has taught me that risk reduction is not apolitical. It has a political side, right? Like it kind of unearths political dynamics or unequal dynamics where people kind of are at the brunt of unequal treatment. And there's also a temporal and spatial nature of risk. It's not something that works only. It does not have a response to acute events only, like when they are happening, but they are existing always, like in 24-hour cycles. They are existing throughout the day and have kind of embedded in the everyday life experiences of people. And people also have situated histories of colonialism, and in the case of Badin, or there are also this kind of ethnocentric or ethnic kind of situated history that comes into play. In Pakistan, there is a large kind of disparity when it comes to certain people having more power over water, for example, or certain resources, and they get to dictate who drowns and who does not drown. And I think we need to understand that there's a need to recognize gaps in the rehabilitation of existing colonial infrastructures and consultative processes, and take people into do not condescend people, but kind of make them an active process of disaster risk reduction. I think that was my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And before we go to Aditi, I just wanted to underline that what you pointed out to us, at least, is that we need to empirically characterize and aim to explain post-colonial DRR across geopolitics, across time, and very much palpating scale in our lives. Yeah. Thank you. Let's go to Aditi Sharan. Dr. Aditi Sharan, and she has also edited the version of the publication that we just launched. So thank you for that. And Aditi is a PhD, an Indian researcher. She did her PhD from University of Auckland, and currently she's working on inclusion and participatory planning with a wide range of organizations, NGOs, and government research institutes. Aditi, please.
Thank you, Mehbai, and thank you for providing this opportunity to have this continuous dialogue on this very important topic. I do have a presentation. I'll just quickly share that. Um, okay, so I've been reflecting on my work a lot. Today, what I'm going to talk about is a little beyond what I have written in the piece. And when we talk about gender in disasters, it is limited to large scale, it is limited to the issues of women. But I was thinking, and think when we were talking about gender inclusion in disasters reduction initiative in practice, what often happens is we say the number of women in a meeting or a number of women attending a particular event is all often indicative of how gender was included in a particular project or a particular initiative, right? And hence, gender inclusion is often limited to a head count rather than the actual uh, nature of participation in which it happens, and whether their issues and concerns are actually included in the discussion or the action agenda that happens post those meetings and events. So, uh, and I was talking to someone, and someone said that we haven't really achieved that with women. So, how can we do this something more with gender beyond the binary and include gender diverse groups in such discussions? And I was thinking, why not? And because it represents a kind of hierarchy that this can happen and only then this can happen. And it's like, why don't we have a set of rules and regulations that cater to these different groups at the same time and can be implemented at the same time? So it is required to move beyond the binaries when we are talking about gender and disasters, and to understand what gender actually means in practice. And and when we are talking about vulnerable categories and how they are included with respect to gender, and so we have examples from India, we have examples from Nepal in terms of the experiences of Metis. We have also have examples for reports from Pakistan and Bangladesh with the cases of hijras as well. Also, like regional variations of different kinds of ethnic gender groups that across the South Asian countries and beyond. Um, I, I I would request everybody to kindly mute. Thank you.
अशोक भाई आपका माइक चालू है. अशोक भाई आपका माइक चालू है.
बंद हो गया, बंद हो गया. So, for those who are not familiar with the context of hijras, they are the oldest non-binary ethnic group in Indian subcontinent, and have been marginalized and discriminated for a very long time, starting with their criminalization under the British rule by the Criminal Rights Act, and that has impacted their lives in the present. And they're not a homogeneous group; they have different sub-identities and variation, with specifically with respect to gender. They may be transgender, they may be intersex people. They also may belong to different social groups at the same time, and also in terms of their social roles, from where they are located differs according to their physical location as well. And whatever literature is available, it shows that they are highly excluded from the DRR related initiatives that have happened till date. And my research specifically focuses on a group from the eastern coast of India, from the state of Odisha. And this group is located on the coast along the Bay of Bengal. And they share their experiences of
a particular cyclone that happened in 2019 that not only had a large scale devastation impact in Odisha, but especially on these people, where that immediately they had no place to live, they had no food to eat. Not everybody had equal access to evacuation centers, which Odisha claims to be a very prompt responder, and which is true to certain extent. But then certain groups, such as the Hijras, are often left out of it, even though some of them were able to access the evacuation camps. They are not prioritized when the relief is being provided, or the food materials is being provided, or the compensations that have been provided, often because they don't have legal documents to show their identity, and sometimes that document does not match their physical appearance, which causes further problems. But disasters then can be seen as an extension of their everyday lives, because these are the problems that they face, they have been facing since very young ages, in terms of access to education, in terms of access to public services, in terms of the support that they get from their teachers, the neighbors, the families, and everything like that. So, but then uh, their vulnerability is not the only thing that needs to be seen. Their capacities also has to be acknowledged. They have unique sets of capacities and skills that, for example, during Cyclone Fani, they had excellent mobilization skills, and they were able to help people to get to safety, and help other Hijra members across the state to quickly get to safe spaces. And such things are not exactly been recognized by any parties that work in the field of disaster management. So that is why we need inclusive policies, and laws and policies that we have today in general or in specific to disasters do have residues of the colonial influence. And whether it is about the anti-beggary laws in our country or the disaster relief codes that exist in certain states, they have not evolved over time. But on the other hand, we also have uh, new laws and policies that target these marginalized groups in order to empower them. And there have been several negotiations over the years for the rights of the non-binary groups in India, which has resulted in the passing of the Transgender Protection of Rights Act in 2019. And even though there are certain definition and clauses in this act that are debatable and uncontested, it is still a first step towards the inclusion of non-binary groups into the mainstream of India. And since the start of, there has been a systemic and more supportive mechanism in order to get the transgender certificates made, or the official documents for identity, which is very important in disasters for them to get relief and compensation. So but the problem at the state level also that adhere to this population. But the problem is that policies and schemes, and in particular this act, it stands as an entity of its own, and it is not related to any disaster related laws or policies that are there in the country. So and in that sense, the role of the district administration is very important, because they are directly involved in implementations of all the policies, and when it comes to disasters. And the case of Cyclone Fani showed that there is no space for gender diverse groups in their action, and whatever they have to do for them, it has to be accommodated additionally on a case to case basis. And the understanding of gender amongst officials is also very limited. It is again limited to women, and prioritizing, for example, pregnant women to get to safety or have access to medical care, which is very important. But it is not that they don't want to help, but they don't have any set rules and regulations to be able to include this group or such groups into their work plan. So in many ways, this group is then again othered, as we say. So it is important then to understand what categories are we talking about, how these categories are formed, who is categorizing whom, and based on what. When we go like in preliminary, it is like primarily it is the difference between the normative self and the deviant other and their underlying power relations and forces of control. Again, like I mentioned, colonial influences in forms of stereotypes and everything are used to categorize the certain, conveniently shove a particular group into the category of the other in case of gender. And because of a post-colonial influence, these categories are, or these identities are hybrid. So there is a coexistence of cultural identity of the Hijra and the Western identities of the transgender or the intersex that have been incorporated into the identity that they have today. And additionally, they are also impacted by the other social groups that they are part of, for example, in terms of religion, in terms of caste, in terms of class, race, ethnicity, age, that all affects. And over time, it's become like what we see with the case of hijras. It has become a label rather than a category. A category is formed to enable the process of access to public services or things like that with the political reason of why a category is formed. But then over years, it becomes a label that leads to their discrimination in various ways and forms. So what I'm trying to say here is that when we do a survey, when we do a study, or because I see a lot of practitioners in the room, it's the so that it is not just a tick mark against a category, and we need to give a little more thought on analyzing that data of where this category is coming from, or what does it mean to be in that category, and so on and so forth. So I'll keep it short because
Yes.
last week I was yeah I'll last week I was I'll just wrap it up quickly. Last week, I was reading somewhere that for the first time, the civil services have allowed a senior Indian Revenue Service officer to change their name and gender officially. And examples like this there is traction on the issue and it
That's
needs
right.
to show in field and in policy. Thank you.
Yeah.
So I'll
Thank
just wrap it up with that. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Sharan. Very important contribution to make DRR more inclusive. And I guess 2 points to be underlined. One is just self-recognition. Generally, the state is supposed to recognize categories and who you are and what you do and what you represent. But the whole idea of self-recognition, that this is what I am and this is what I do, including matters of gender. We have the last presentation, and that's from Dr. Aisha Siddiqui. She's an associate professor in human geography at Cambridge. And she is going to, if I can request, it's Dr. Aisha Siddiqui.
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, good, welcome. And she's going to tell us about some sort of colonial way of looking at things and what's the post-colonial, and again use the example, not necessarily the same floods, but about flooding in general in Pakistan and how the state responds to that. Thank you. Please go ahead. And we have limited time, so after you will have questions. And JC will sum up after that. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the invitation to participate in the special issue and also in today's discussion. I had already kind of considered talking about just two aspects or points that I present in the paper. So it may well take less time than originally allocated. My research background is on work in disasters, primarily from a global south perspective. And the field work that I've done in Pakistan has been on the floods in 2010 and 2011, and actually in the region that Nirmal was talking about as well. So my fieldwork was in the southern province of Sindh, around Thatta, Badin, and Parker. And in the contribution that I've made in the paper for this special issue, what I've tried to highlight, though perhaps not. Can you hear me? Okay.
Dr. Rao, if you could mute yourself, Dr. Rao, please. Thank you.
So the point that I've tried to make with regards to thinking about coloniality, disasters, and also post-colonial futures is that in some ways flooding in the Indus River basin is not a surprise, right? When we hear about massive floods impacting this basin in normally around the monsoon season, normally July, August, September, that kind of time, normally along that whole river delta, we always hear things like, oh, this is unprecedented. Okay, maybe 2022 when 35 million people were affected was unprecedented. It wasn't really incomparable to what happened in 2011 or 2012 or 2010 or various years before, right? So there is a certain spatial and temporal trend around flooding that takes place in the Indus Basin. And we need to think quite carefully about the structural reasons why addressing these vulnerabilities remain kind of outside of our reach in the context of these floods in Pakistan. And just to emphasize that point in pictures, the image on the left is from the 2010 floods, and the image on the right is from the ones in 2022. And you can see the blue and the red, roughly, not exactly, it's not an exact mapping, but the flooding areas, regions, the most affected, the most blue, the most red, they are fairly similar, right? So nobody can claim that that these floods are like a big surprise and these should not have happened. So in that case, then, what are those structural reasons and what are the colonial logics behind why addressing these challenges remains outside of our reach? And I emphasize in particular on two: the material coloniality and the coloniality of knowledge, the epistemic, whose knowledge counts, which knowledge is important, the epistemic coloniality. And I'm just going to read a little bit from the paper that I gave, because I do think that I articulate this a little bit better there. The thing is that the barrages and the irrigation networks that were built in the early 20th century, late 19th, early 20th century by British colonial regimes in particularly the upper Indus Basin, but coming all the way down to the lower Indus Basin from Punjab into Sindh, they were very successful for delivering what they were meant to do, which was political patronage, right? You needed to bring all these lands into the control of the crown. So the barrages, the irrigation canal networks, those of you who study history in Pakistan know how proud history textbooks are of the largest contiguous canal network anywhere in the world, etc. But that was never really meant to be anything other than providing, quote unquote, opening up lands for landlords and getting their acquiescence for imperial rule. So there was a political purpose for this. And that kind of material coloniality is very visible. It's very much there. And we saw in 2010 when assessment reports, etc., were done of the large floods in 2010, that some of the worst effects were not actually from rainwater, but from barrage-related issues such as backwater effect, sedimentation, aggradation, and reduced water channel capacity to carry water, and significant drainage-related challenges and waterlogging, salinity, etc., which even exist in non-flood years, right? So there is that material element of these big barrages, these canals, this irrigation that only keeps the water in and doesn't enable it to drain out. And then the other aspect, the epistemic coloniality, is around the ideas and the belief system that this same kind of high modernist engineered river system, which works, a hydrological system, which works entirely against the rhythmicity, the natural flows of the river, that this engineered system is going to, quote unquote, solve the problems that it has produced. So state planning in Pakistan has continued with this epistemic coloniality of unwavering kind of ideological belief that modernist river engineering is going to is going to be a panacea for avoiding such disasters. And this conviction in large dams and more engineering solutions and more kind of bigger, better, stronger, real masculine kind of river control paradigm. It's really difficult to move away from that because it is the preferred solution of people who are in power, right? So in a country with a powerful military, when the military considers dams and barrages its strategic assets, why would they be willing to decommission what they see as being very much part of their ambit of power? So for a post-colonial future, we have to challenge these power structures, which are very difficult to challenge. But as Nirmal explained, there are organizations lobbying, mobilizing on the ground. And I think it's also important to not talk about, even though perhaps I mislead us by saying a post-colonial future, there isn't such a thing as a post-colonial future. It cannot be a universalized solution. It has to be very much context-specific on the people, the infrastructures, the dynamics that are on the ground. And lastly, it has to be different and not more of the same, right? So after each flood year, the military chief in Pakistan always tries to mobilize more support for, we need to build Kala Bagh Dam, or we need to complete the construction of the other dam, or it cannot be more of the same that results in these problems to start with. It has to look like a radically different future, not a continuation of the past. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It was very succinct and suitable to our schedule. I really appreciate what you're saying, Dr. Siddiqui, is the reflection on DRR as discursive, rhetorical, deeply political term in the name of science and technology and management. And that's something that we need to ask again. Thank you. We finished with excellent presentations that was specifically made for this roundtable. And the full text of each of this is available in the issue, which is recently launched, and it is in the chat box. And you can write to Manish, and he will also send you a copy if you want directly, and forget to download it. Are there, JC, we need you to come in, and JC, are you there?
Yes.
Very much. So we were wondering if we could have a couple of questions first, and then we request you to sum up. Is that fine? So one question I have already received, and that is very much targeted to Aditi Sharan, doctor, that how this gender in DRR, there is a lot of work is done on that, and a lot of good work. So when we look at from the progress, a lot of progress is done. So what remains is what you have pointed out. So how does one sort of gets a correct balance between appreciating what is achieved and still moving further what is yet to be achieved? If you could say that one or two concrete actions for that, that would be very useful. That was a question which came up. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. I think, yes, a lot of work has been done and on gender. In fact, gender, I mean, a lot of work has been done since the 1970s if we were to think about how gender has been. And there is progress. There's always progress to what we were and what we are moving towards. And the aim for this is to be more equitable in terms of not just one particular group, because even on the work that is being done on gender, 90% or 80% would be specific to men and women. And then maybe since the early 2000s, the 2010s, we are seeing more work on gender diverse groups. So yes, we can use some of the good practices, as we call it, from things that we have learned from the past and use it as a method to include for gender diverse groups and create that balance. But it is also important to understand, and what we are talking about in this conference is that a post-colonial approach is very much needed to understand the specific contexts of those groups and to have more localized knowledge than what we have. Of course, what the theories that we have for gender, for disasters are all very important and need to be sort of contextualized appropriately for that balance to be found, I think.
Thank you. Thank you. And the second question is for Dr. Raju, and that is that how useful is it is useful, but how do we make it more useful, this post-colonial futures approach to where there is underlining uncertainties, vulnerabilities, fragilities, and fractures in post-colonial DRR already. So how can we use post-colonial futures approach to overcome, resolve, and transform some? And it's a long, big question, overwhelming, but one or two concrete, quick responses if I have. Dr. Raju.
Thanks, Mihir, and thanks for the question. And I think a very, very quick sort of response to that is, I think there's some reflections in the special issue. So we recommend please take a look at that, because I think it brings together many different perspectives. And I think I'd like to repeat again, I think what Aisha said at the end of Aisha's presentation is very important, that there's not one future that we're talking about, but rather in terms of what does actually the post-colonial futures mean, because this might look very different in each of our contexts, even across South Asia. But I think more importantly, it's not an answer that we're seeking, but rather to engage in the debate of opening up theoretically and in practice, exactly in terms of why is it that we continue to fail in sort of addressing questions of vulnerability, questions of hegemony, questions of structural violence, and coloniality in many ways. We see that continue to be reflected. And I think that's exactly why we've been asking ourselves also as academic people in sort of how do we push the debate forward so that we're not reinventing the same kind of research? How can we sort of move away from a cookie cutter sort of approach of implementing the Sendai, of implementing the SDGs, but rather how do we make it more relevant for our own South Asian context? I'll stop here. Thanks, Mihir.
Thank you. Thank you so much. In the interest of time, we are 4 minutes behind. JC, can I request you please to help us sum up and tell us possible ways ahead, to both in terms of action and in terms of research and learning that you think will benefit DRR as a topic and as a system? Thanks.
Thanks, Mihir. I promise I'll try to be brief. Namaste, everyone. Thank you so very much, Mihir, Emmanuel, for spearheading the publication of this special issue, and Manish for pulling everything together in terms of the publication and this webinar as well. I feel like a bit like a sidekick somehow to this whole thing, and an uncomfortable sidekick. I feel like I'm the white middle-aged man in the room, one who doesn't speak any of the South Asian languages. So I'm really here in a sort of learner's seat, trying to get as much as possible into my mind, and trying to see how I can learn from you all in this process. And I mean, I have very little first-hand experience in South Asia, but I have learned a lot from this small experience, and from research and publications from South Asia in general. And I mean, it's largely because South Asia is the cradle of post-colonial studies. However we look at it, this is the most significant region of the world in terms of trying to pioneer theoretical advances and methodological advances in trying to move things forward, and not only in disaster studies and disaster risk reduction, but much beyond that. And this has had a huge influence on me and in my work in the Philippines in particular. And what postcolonial studies in general, I think, tells us that might be useful to understanding what we call disasters, quote marks, and what we call disaster risk reduction, quote marks as well, is that there cannot be such a universal thing as a disaster. There cannot be such a universal set of theories that will help us understand people's experiences of hardship and suffering wherever we are in the region. And as such, there cannot be any universal methods to find out about these experiences or to explore pathways to enhance people's everyday life. And I think this is where South Asia is playing now a pioneer role in the specific space of disasters and disaster studies and disaster risk reduction. And this is what this special issue is showing us, I think. And what the four presentations by Nirmal, Sushi, Aditi, and Ayesha have shown us is the importance of grounding. The grounding in the context, and the very local context. I'm not even talking about a country. I'm talking a very, very local context. And this means to further understand the local issues that matter. It's about understanding the identities of the people we support or we work with. It's about trying to explore different methods to research, but as well to share and to dialogue and to engage with different people and cultures. And I mean, we had Sushi's kind of using a poem to actually share what people have been telling her. It's about the language, and I mean, I wished we could have this in multiple local languages instead of just using English. And I like your point, Mihi, and your commitment that the future issues of South Asia Disaster Net will always have a paper in any of the local languages. I think it's crucial, because we can't use English to understand local issues or local identities, because it will always create that kind of bias or filter, which is not what we are aiming for here. So yeah, I mean, overall for me, it's a matter of epistemologies and ontologies. It's about what we study, whether there's there are different experiences of hardship and harm, and how we understand these different experiences. And I think the spatial issue kind of sets some pathways, again, both theoretically and methodologically to get beyond the set of universal concepts, theories, values, methods that we have in hands mostly at the moment. So yeah, thank you everyone for your contribution, and thank you for being here in such large number. To be honest, I wasn't expecting 100+ people to be attending this event. So I think this is a good sign that this kind of agenda is getting traction, and I think South Asia is leading the way. So yeah, thank you so very much, Mihir.
Thank you. You know, it's not the number. I was looking at the names of people, and starting from Dr. Ian Davis, who's with us, there is hardly 6 or 7 names which are unfamiliar. So it's a wide range of academics, UN, of donor community, national authority. So I'm very happy that such a widespread interest in this topic and this particular publication has been generated. So thank you, all of you, from my side, for AIDMI side, from the side of the panel members, of course, from JC and Raju, both of us, 3 of us. And as I said, this is yours. If you want to make it yours, please suggest topics and contributions, subscribe, be in touch, and we would be very much there to respond and accommodate, not accommodate, actually actively embrace the ideas and insights that you shared. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mihir. I also wanted to say a huge thank you to Manish for pulling all of this together behind the scenes. Thank you so much, Manish.
I was hesitant to do that. I'm glad you did. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sushmita, thank you, of course. Anisha, thanks so much. Emma, we missed you. Thanks. Yeah. Deepak ji, Ramrocha. There I Ramro. Serena, thank you so much. Nimesh ji, thank you. Shubhankar Saab. Dr. Davis, thank you so much. And Zen, both of you, for finding time and joining. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate it. Syed Farah, thank you. Ashok ji, thank you, thank you.
Asha going.
Sudharatna, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi Zen, thanks. good to see you. Ramakrishna ji, जोरदार. Arvinas, thank you. So then, how have you been? Let's catch up. I'll call you. Yeah. Thank you, Arvi. We will. Ashokji will let you know. Definitely next session. I think it's going to be on X-ray heat, but we'll see. We'll see. It's exciting to organize, but it's also a bit of back and forth, and yeah. And Ranaji will send you a copy of PPT if you would kindly send us an email to Manishji, please. Shubhankarji, thank you, of course. You always support constructive ideas. Samaji, thank you. Gauravji, thank you.